Well, hi, everybody. Welcome into UnAnchored Boston once again with Bob Lobel. I'm Mike Lynch, and we remind you that our show is brought to you by Cold Springs RV, your destination for all things camping in where? We're New Hampshire, of course, and the great George Gray at George Gray's Lexington Toyota. Speaking of great, we've got a great guest today, Patrick Sullivan. And Bob Lobel, you have the honors of doing the introduction, so take it away.
Well, I'm just happy to have a chance to, Pat, when we asked him if he'd come on, he said absolutely, but I thought he was trying to stay away from sportscasters after.
It wasn't the sportscasters, it was the sports writers. The sportscasters were pretty good guys.
How would you describe your tenure and your relationship with the media when you were the general manager of the New England Patriots?
I would describe my relationship with the media as being remarkably good. I felt, basically, 99% of the folks that covered the team fairly and equitably and with good judgment, and then, there's 1% that, made it uncomfortable, and
nobody that present here, right? I'm just trying to say what we have to apologize for.
No, you don't need to apologize for anything. Lobel was kind of a wise guy. Mike Lynch was straightforward. Boom, no nonsense. Just get it done. And but Bob Lobel always wanted to throw in a little wisecrack whenever he could.
Nothing's changed, Pat. Nothing's changed even on this show.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, well, you know what? You guys made it so easy.
Are you wearing shorts right now? Because I know you did a lot of your broadcasting.
I am, actually. As a matter of fact, that was kind of a personal question, but the answer is yes, I am.
Yes, guilty.
Probably both have done sportscasts in shorts, other than in a suit.
And
Patrick, as you've gone on to great success with your Game Creek satellite trucks and everything, but as you take a look at the league now, and it's certainly a lot different than it was 20, 30 years ago when you guys were so deeply involved. Are you surprised at all as the way the league has developed and become the sport in America and the go-to place for excitement? And the way it's all developed, are you at all surprised?
I'm not surprised about the way the game has developed and the interest in the sport has developed. I'm not surprised about that at all. What's amazing to me is the incredible. Say hi to our grandson Aiden.
Hey,
this guy Garrett's.
Hey, nice. Good one. Okay. Good one.
Lobster.
That's a lobster.
Yep,
so
he made the show already.
What I am surprised about is the incredible increase in. Hold on, guys. Will you go see your dad? Yeah. Thank you, pal. So what I am surprised about is the incredible increase in the value of the television deals. That is really staggering. And when we sold the Patriots in 1988, the television money was $24 million, right, per team per year. Amazon, which is now a client of ours to do Thursday Night Football, is paying $88 million a game for that. So that kind of valuation, and then you have the Sunday ticket packages, the regular network packages, and everything else. And you're up around $190 million per team before they open the gates. So that's the thing that surprised me about the business.
That can soothe an awful lot of headaches, can it?
Yeah, what it does is it pays the players, And if you actually drew a graph going back really into 1960 when the when the AFL started, you could actually draw out two graphs: one television rights, another one player payroll, right? And they would really just match each other all through the years, and that's if you can pay the players, it does resolve a lot of headaches, because one of the biggest headaches that we ever had was strikes. Player strikes was just so destructive. And we had several of them in the years leading up to my dad selling the team, and it was disruptive in so many ways. It just and interestingly enough, Robert Kraft could have bought the team in 1988, and he passed because there was still labor unrest, and he paid almost $90 million more for it like 3 years later. And when I asked him, he said, my advisors told me don't do anything until there's labor peace. Now there's labor peace and everybody made out, right?
You don't hear, like, the famous holdouts are always Hanna and Gray, but you don't hear holdouts anymore. Nobody holds out, right?
No, because there's a salary cap, and there's salary there's a salary structure for rookies, and that was always a sore point with a veteran, particularly John Hanna. If you paid a guy like Trevor Maddich more money than John was making, that didn't make John feel very good. And now that stuff is all structured, and everybody knows what they make. And you occasionally, you had the Lamar Jackson thing this year, but he didn't hold out. He eventually came to a deal, right?
How about the popularity of the sport? Are you surprised at all at the dominance that the NFL has achieved? Because it's now America's pastime. Baseball can say what it wants, but the way the sport has developed and how adaptable it is to television, that's where the partnership has really bloomed. Everybody's profited by this. If it wasn't worth for the television station networks, they wouldn't be paying the money. If they weren't able to sell the spots, they wouldn't be paying the money.
No, that's true. That's absolutely true. As I said before, you track player contract or player salaries to TV compensation. And answer your question, Bob, I know he's not a really popular guy in this region, but Roger Goodell is a really smart guy. He's a very smart man, and he's a great strategist, and he really knows what he's doing, and he actually really likes the game, and he has the confidence of his ownership group, and he's really taken. Pete Rozelle was probably one of the great PR geniuses of all time, and Roger has taken that to another level, really.
Yeah, let me ask you this. You probably, I was at the very first game against the Broncos, the BU's Nicholson Field. I think you're a year younger than I am, so weren't quite sure if we were watching a college game or a pro game, but it was a football game. And I was so glad we didn't have to watch the Giants anymore on Sunday afternoon, that we finally had a team. How tough was it, or how easy was it, eventually working for your dad?
It was incredibly easy. He was a marvelous father. He was a great grandfather. He was a great husband to my mother for 53 years. He was really a great, great guy and a real visionary, right? And he never, ever criticized me in front of anybody else. If he disagreed with something I did, he'd sit down, and his question to me would be, I'm really curious what made you make that decision. And can you kind of back it up and let me know what your thoughts are? And here's how I would do it if I were in your shoes. So he was just the most remarkable guy. He was when he worked at the Boston Braves, he helped start the Jimmy Fund with Bill Coster and and of course, Dr. Farber and a bunch of other folks that really stepped up, Joe Cronin and Louis Perini, who owned the team. But while he worked there, he said to Lou Perini, hey, by the way, the best view of a baseball game is actually on the roof of Braves Field, which is now Nickerson Field at BU. The Patriots started there. And he said, if we put seats up there and then put a nice concession stand and everything else, maybe we can sell them for more money. Well, that invented the roof box, which eventually became the luxury box, right?
Right.
Which is a major part of every sport's economic structure. So he was a real visionary guy and just a great guy. Just a great guy.
What in the world possessed him to go after a football team? What was the motivational behind the AFL, the Patriots, and your dad?
It was the Colts New York Giants game that went into overtime. Johnny Unitas, Raymond Berry played in that game. Sam Huff, all those guys. He watched that game, and I remember him saying to me, "This is the future of sports," because it was so exciting and compelling game. Right? It was really one of the legendary games of all time, and he had worked at Notre Dame. He had worked at Notre Dame during their glory years for Coach Frank Leahy. He also worked at Boston College for Coach Leahy when BC won its only national championship in 1941. And so he had a love for football. He worked in baseball, but he had a deep love for football. And when he didn't have a verbal agreement, but he had at least a conversation with Bert Bell, who was the commissioner of the NFL at the time, to get a team in Boston. And then, unfortunately, Bert Bell passed away. And when the American Football League started, Frank Leahy was working for the San Diego Chargers, or the LA Chargers at the time, back again. And Coach Leahy called my dad and said, "Hey, if you want a franchise, do it." And he got 10 guys together. They chipped in $25,000 a piece, and they had a franchise.
Crazy. I mean, really, how crazy was that?
Yeah.
When you think about it, when the WHA merged with the NHL, they only took 4 teams. And when the ABA merged with the NBA, but when the AFL merged with the NFL, all the original 8 teams were still intact and became not only the part of the fabric, many of them became the fabric of the National Football League after the merger.
Yeah, but don't forget too that the merger occurred in 1966. The leagues actually didn't start playing each other except for preseason games until 1970. But in 1970, the Steelers, the Browns, and somebody else moved to the American Conference. Right? So it was
Colts.
It was and the Colts. That's right, the Colts. And it was it was a sign that there was true parity and respect for the two leagues. And believe me, that was tough. There were old liners in the NFL like George Halas and people like that wanted to crush the AFL. And but cooler heads prevailed when Al Davis started signing all their quarterbacks. So that was part of the great history of that merger.
You guys had such a colorful, and I use that term in a very entertaining way as we look back. You had a lot of ups and downs and ins and outs and crises and calm times, and it was an amazing history the Patriots have had, especially the Patriots under your dad, and all the things that had to happen to get the franchise to where it is today. I know Robert Kraft has done an amazing job in cultivating the team as it is now and staying with the league. But there was a lot of blood, sweat, and tears that went into that operation before Robert Kraft came along.
Yeah, and a lot of blood was spilled, literally and figuratively. You know, and it was you know, it was a great way. It was a great way to grow up. It was a real bootstrap operation. You know, in the early days, we had a team of ball boys, and I was the little guy. So my job was to these bigger guys would go in to the stands before they'd have nets and try and retrieve the ball. And when the ball dropped on the ground, my job was to run and pick it up and run away with it. Right. So it was, you know, because in that era, you know, you'd have games, oftentimes you'd have games 48-45, something like that. Right. So a lot of balls were getting kicked in the stands, and they were, you know, at the time, I think the ball was like 30.
I wish I had some video of that.
You know,
so
you know, that it just, I mean, and the players, you know, the players like Gino and Babe and Jim Hunt and Jim Nance and guys like that. They're such great guys, you know, and they're, you know, they all had other jobs, right? Yeah. You know, it was, and I was thinking about when Bob texted me about this, I was like, well, you know what? It used to be that we would actually go to training camp on July 4th. And
wow.
We'd spend 6 weeks, double sessions up at Andover Academy. And Steve Sirota was the head coach up there. Mike, you probably remember him.
Yeah, sure do.
And he would watch practices, and Mike Hollowback, and you do two sessions a day, and it was, you know, 95 degrees out.
Crazy. That was crazy.
And it was because guys had to actually play themselves into shape because they didn't have off-season programs, and, you know, we didn't have the facilities that they have for weight training and stuff like that. You know, it was just a different world, right?
But it was a guy named Jerry DeLuca.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
He was a milkman.
Okay, there you go. That's amazing.
With you know, six bottles of milk, you know, and he'd take the empty ones out, and, you know, and my brother and I were like, wait at the window for him to come. So, wow, Jerry DeLuca's going to come and pick up our milk and give us our milk. And he was that's how it was.
And Jerry was
driving a snowplow. All the Patriots had jobs like that.
Yeah, and you know, Jerry was a great offensive guard for us, and, you know, there were just some really great people, and it was a lot of fun. It was really a lot of fun, and, you know, Mike Hollowback was a great guy, really super guy, and you know, as we kind of went through the whole experience, the number of really terrific people that I was fortunate enough to come in contact with is pretty great. You know, you guys knew Gino Capoletti very well, and he was a very special guy, you know, and his off-season job was working at Channel 4, right? And because he was a really good-looking guy, he was a great dresser. Everybody called him the Duke, right? So, a lot better dresser than Bob Lobel, by the way, I would say.
All right, I can take it. Most everybody was, as a matter of fact.
Speaking of great dressers and great guys, let's give a plug to one of our sponsors, George Gray and George Gray's Lexington Toyota. You know, if you're thinking about a new vehicle, go where me and Lobie go. Go see our friend George Gray at George Gray's Lexington Toyota. Been a long-time Patriots fan, Boston sports fan. Lobie and I have been customers for years because we know that George Gray will treat you right. They, like the Sullivans and the Patriots, are a family-owned and operated dealership that we trust and you can trust as well. Go see the great George Gray at Lexington Toyota, 409 Mass Ave in Lexington, Mass. All right.
Listen, Patrick, you and your family have had many ups and downs. So I have to say, what would be your favorite moment as GM, family owner of the New England Patriots? And then I guess I'd have to go and ask you the least favorite moment at the same time. But you have to have extremes on both sides. And the Patriots at the time were a team of extremes, as we've just pointed out. So how would you answer that?
Well, I'd have to say my favorite moment was the AFC beating Miami in the AFC Championship, the Squish the Fish game, right? And that was, that was after many years of losing games at the Orange Bowl, many years, like 14 straight games, right? It was a great, great victory. And it was, strategically, one of the really brilliant coaching jobs of all time by Raymond Berry, because, he was so adverse to mistakes. And he was very specific about making sure guys did their job correctly and almost perfectly, right? And we threw the ball 11 times in that game, and Robert Weathers and Mosi and Craig James ran for, I don't know, it was 300 plus yards, something like that. And it was just a really great, great victory for the whole team, and it was, we had beaten the Jets on the road, and we beat the Raiders on the road, and now we beat those guys on the road. And it was the first time a team went to the Super Bowl coming out of the wild card and winning three road games to do it. So it was quite an achievement.
Yeah, that was quite a run. Lynch and I both remember it very well. That was an amazing run, actually.
Yeah.
I can remember Jim Bowman landing on a fumble in Oakland or whatever. It was just, but then again, that Oakland game had you and Hugh Millen, or Matt Millen, rather.
Yeah, and I'd say that was probably my least favorite memory, because you and oh God, who was your camera guy? Really great guy.
Tom Raycamp.
Yeah, Tommy Raycamp, right?
Yeah.
So you two guys somehow or another got in the locker room early or something, and you got me in a pretty hot moment, and I kind of came across as a real jackass. And,
I apologize for that.
And the next day, a friend of mine's watching it in New York, and that whole thing came up, and Warner Wolf goes, and that guy's team won. Right. So and meanwhile, my wife says that she has a friend in Honolulu, and that picture of me getting slugged by Matt was on the front page of the Honolulu Advertiser, right?
Wow.
But the reason that actually is probably my least favorite moment is that was a jackass move on my part, and it took away from a great victory. It took attention away from the performance of a great group of guys, particularly our offensive line. There again, we dominated the ball on the ground and or dominated the game rather, and those guys did a great job. And my shenanigans actually took away from that.
So what, I would say yes and no, because I think that was a standalone moment, Patrick. I think you're giving yourself too much blame here. And while the moment made you famous in a way that you didn't want to become famous, it was a standalone moment, and I don't think it took away one iota from the team's victory. And I can understand why you'd say that, and I understand why you'd feel that way. But trust me on this, even though we might have been the ones to sneak in the locker room and got your video and were responsible for it, I think that was a standalone thing and had no downside on the team's accomplishment.
So the aftermath of that was there a couple of fun things that actually occurred. When we got home, there was a box sitting on our doorstep. My wife Lynn and I lived in Newton, and I opened up the box. And before I opened up the box, it said, "Next time you play the Raiders, wear this, Newton PD." Right? I opened it up. It's a riot helmet from the Newton Police. Right? So then the other one was when we started in our current business. We were doing a game for Fox in Foxborough, and they asked me if I'd go on the field and talk to Matt Millen, who was doing color for Fox at that time.
Oh, wow.
And so I hadn't seen Matt, and I walked on the field and I shouted out, "Hey, Sluggo." And he came over and we shook hands and everything. We had a lot of laughs. I was wired, and this thing is now getting taped for the Fox pregame show. And Millen says to me, "You know what's amazing?" He said, "You walked into that mess, and I walked into it, and I had my helmet off, and I gave you a good whacking that you deserved, right?" And then he said, "But that Howie Long, he never took his helmet off when he got in a fight." He said, "Look how pretty he is compared to us," And that aired, on the pregame show. And Michael Strahan looked over at him and he said, "Yeah, that's true. I never saw you took your helmet off in a fight."
Very funny.
He's a Charlestown guy. He's smart.
Right, exactly.
He's been in a lot of street fights.
But like, for example, we did the Super Bowl this year, and we did the pregame show, and I saw Howie, and we have a great relationship now, and we still look back on it and have some laughs, and it was.
Lobel was right when he said, I think what that scene did is that the Raiders, there's a lot of perception about the Raiders, but one thing they were bullies, and when someone stands up to a bully without any equipment on and half the size of some of these guys, I think you endeared yourself to all of New England in perpetuity, because that's you stood up to the Oakland Raiders, and nobody did that, or nobody survived that did that, right?
It might have been all of New England with one notable exception, and that's my wife.
Lynn wielded the stick in that family.
Yeah. Absolutely. Still does.
Game Creek, you mentioned that you did the game at Foxborough, and I know what you're referring to. And what was your instinct in getting involved in that business, and what would you credit your success? I know we've talked about football. We'll get back to football in a second, but you really have been extremely successful in the Game Creek satellite truck business.
Well, what actually happened was the last several years I was at the Patriots, I noticed that these third-party entities would come in to do the games. It used to be a truck would pull up and say NBC Sports or ABC Sports or CBS Sports. And there started to be these third parties coming up, and I started to ask some of the guys that were working on it, questions about it. And they said, the networks all the networks were they basically had a triopoly, right? You guys were in the business, you know what I'm talking about. Yep. And then when Cap Cities bought ABC and GE bought NBC and the Tisch family bought CBS, well, all of a sudden people started really counting money, right? and they're looking at this and they're saying, wait, we're spending $3.5-4 million at that time building a facility that's used 25 to 40 days a year. And that doesn't make any sense. So they all got out of the business when we got into it. And then, of course, Fox Sports started, and they never even had a mobile division. Turner started, they never had one. And so, well, actually Turner did, they had a couple of trucks, but over time, the network's getting out of that business, and then just the insane proliferation of content, particularly women's sports, right? Just really, really helped propel us to where we are today, which is we're really very proud of the progress of the company, and our three sons actually really run it on a day-to-day basis for us, and it's a lot of fun. There's not many major events that are going on in the United States that we're not involved in.
I was going to ask you about, it's not just football anymore; it's across the board.
Yeah, I mean, we do. We basically have 4 segments of work. We have entertainment, so we do things like the Peyton Manning's quiz show, whatever that's called. And we do Jimmy Fallon's. That's my That's my jive. Then we do American Ninja, things like that. Some concerts, Taylor Swift, and then we do a lot of political work for CNN and for the news, ABC News, and so on. And then we have our sports stuff, which is basically the big nationals: ESPN, Fox, CBS, NBC, and Turner. And then our regional business is very important to us. So that's Nesson, Masson, which is the Orioles and the Nationals, the Yes Network, which has the Yankees, SNY, which has the Mets. And basically we do all the regional sports on the East Coast.
It's better than the National Football League. Having satellite trucks is better than the NFL.
Yeah, they're actually not satellite; they're actually production trucks. We're
I know, right.
Yeah.
I know.
And we do all the Bay Area stuff, believe it or not. So we do all the Giants and A's and the Sharks and the Warriors, and we have a great group of customers and a great group of people that I'm fortunate enough to work with.
If people are just tuning in, we're talking with Patrick Sullivan, former general manager of the Patriots, but owner of Game Creek Video or Productions. Game Creek Video, is that what it's called?
It's Game Creek Video.
Yeah, and it's basically a mobile television studio on wheels, basically, right? That's probably the best way to put it.
Yep.
And sometimes you drop your trailer or at someplace like the Garden, and you may leave it there for a whole year, right?
Rarely do that. I mean, we do, because that particular asset it does both Celtics and Bruins in the winter, and then it does Red Sox in the summer. And it's called 9-4, by the way, which is we name our trucks. We call that 9-4. Ted Williams, Bobby Orr, right? And
how many trucks, Pat?
We have 76 trucks.
Holy mackerel!
And we don't let them sit if they don't make money when they're sitting. So we try and utilize them as much as we can.
Okay.
And so they don't really, it depends on the customer, so like in Philadelphia, we do the Sixers and the Flyers, and then that truck moves over to do the Phillies. So it kind of depends on the customer and the region.
Remarkable. It's remarkable that's the way it's grown. That was a genius. I don't want to say that because you're sitting there, but to recognize that niche in society or the niche in the business world and that industry, and to connect the two, your previous job and your new job, that's pretty damn clever, I'd have to say. And you really take some credit for that. Chucky, your brother, and Michael Jackson.
I wish it was Michael Jordan.
how brutal was that on the operation in the family?
Well, that was a tough business decision, right? That was a tough business decision, and my brother went into it with great intentions, as he did with everything he ever did. His primary intention was to help our family, and he thought, well, this was going to be something really, really successful. And Michael Jackson at the time was basically on par with where Taylor Swift is today, right? And it was sort of like, well, this is a can't lose proposition, but it ended up being an awful proposition. And my dad, being the guy he is, was confronted with either having Chuck go into personal bankruptcy or selling the team, and he chose to sell the team. I'll never forget this for as long as I live. We sat in a law firm, one of the many law firms that should put a statue up of my dad, and he there was a bankruptcy attorney there, and he said, you can go into bankruptcy just like the Hunts did. And he looked across the table and said, we're not the Hunts, we're the Sullivans, and I'm not going to put my son into bankruptcy. Sold the team. That was that. It was an easy decision for him to protect his son. So it was a bad business decision. But at the end of the day, my entire family has survived quite well. And I'm not talking about my own situation, but my brothers and sisters. And I'm on Cape Cod, and right behind me is another house that my dad and mother bought in 1970. And there are 64 people staying there this weekend that are all part of our family. So do we own a $6 billion asset? No, we don't. But we have a better asset than the money. We have a lot of family love.
That's a really great way of putting it, Mike. Sorry.
You know what? And to compound the Michael Jackson situation, in the fall of '87, the NFL players went on strike, and you had substitute players or SCAP. So the income, the revenue stream, the timing could have been worse. I guess is what I'm trying to say, right?
Oh yeah, no, because what happened. When you had all that labor unrest, the television money stayed flat for like 8 years.
Yeah.
And the price for the players was going up, but the television revenue stayed flat. And then when I can't overestimate or over express how destructive the strike was, not just financially, but also to the team, right? Because you had guys that crossed the picket line, other guys that didn't, and it was really that probably, I would probably, now that I'm thinking about it, that'd probably be right up there with the most unpleasant time in my tenure at the Patriots.
Hard to imagine trying to run a pro football team and everything else that goes into putting that operation together on a day-to-day basis and having to deal with all this other stuff at the same time. Can't imagine what that must have been like. I mean,
well, it was it was crazy because Brian Holloway. Remember Brian?
Of course.
So Brian drove a Rolls Royce, and Brian was the player rep. So Brian came in, and all of these union folks, plumbers, electricians, teachers, they arrived in buses to go walk the picket line, and they had to spread the picket line so Brian could drive his Rolls into a parking lot. Right? It was so crazy. The whole thing was just, it was nuts. And it's a shame because it was about 5 wasted years. I wish it never happened. Right.
Let me ask this, Patrick. How did who was the first person to step into a room and said, Raymond Berry is the answer? Raymond Berry's the guy we want to go after. When he was, if I'm not mistaken, selling hats at the time?
He was working for his brother-in-law who owned a sporting goods company, and he was selling hats, but he was still living in Medfield. And I honestly, Mike, I just thought at that particular point in time, what we really needed was just an intense level of credibility with the players. And I don't want to be critical of Coach Meyer because he's passed away, but at the time we needed somebody to come in that just had amazing credibility, and Raymond had amazing credibility with players, even though he had been out of the game for 18 or 20 months or so, and I just felt he would bring a level of credibility and stability that we desperately needed at that time.
I thought he was great. I mean, in terms of working with a coach, I know they've had some interesting personalities there since, including the present one and the past one, Parcells. But the Raymond Berry was a hell of a guy, and But I also remember the day you fired him, and I wanted to know what was on behind that.
That could be up there in the worst days too.
Caused me wreck my car, as a matter of fact, that day.
I got into a fight.
Chasing you around Foxborough, and Jack Edwards was pursuing me, and I'm trying to get away from Jack Edwards so I could get this story with Pat Sullivan. And I ran my car into a fence in Foxborough.
You know, and Jack is still a pest.
He is.
Right?
I got into a fist fight that day on the payphone. When you I think you were laughing about it. You looked over to the right, and over by the coat room was a payphone, and some guy who wrote for the New Haven something or other says, "Hey, I need the phone." And I need the phone too. I'm calling Channel 5 because we didn't have cell phones, and I'm telling them we got a scoop here. You know, Ravenberry's been hired, and Ron Meyer's gone, and blah 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 blah. And so this guy got behind me, started blowing smoke at me. I says, "Hey, knock it off," you know. So I'm going back to the midday news. So finally, I just dropped the phone and I just laid into him. We went tumbling into the coat room, and everybody's laughing like hell. The phone's hanging there. The producer's yelling, "Mike, where are you?" You know. And Brian Leary was down. He called me Sluggo. And but that was fortunately that didn't get too many headlines that day. You know,
today you'd get sued up the yin yang for doing.
Yeah, I would. But yeah, my Irish came out that.
You had trouble running your football team. How do you think we had trouble covering it? For
well,
so how do you sell Raymond Berry to the players? I mean, you know, they go, "What? The guy has been, you know, like, how do you sell him to the players?"
Well, most of the players, you know, if you'll recall, you know, most of that team had actually been assembled in the late 70s, right? Yeah. And so they had been around. They knew Raymond. Raymond was an assistant with us, and he, you know, he had been around, and so most of certainly the veteran guys knew him very well, and they embraced it, you know, right away. I mean, he came in, and you know, he's you know, he's just a really straightforward guy, you know, and you know, obviously had all the credentials. He's a Hall of Fame player, and he made his reputation based on being very precise in everything that he did, and he demanded that of our players as well.
Wow. And this would have been the tail end of '84 season, and then '85 was. Remind me.
It's not me, Mike.
No, it's not me. So it was in his second year that you made to the Super Bowl, right? It was
yes.
The tail end of '84, he replaced Ron Meyer.
Yep, it was 84. We finished out of the hunt, and then '85 we ended up in the Super Bowl after the '85 season. And Raymond, you know, Raymond did. He assembled a great staff. And he, you know, Raymond is an extremely religious guy, but he never wore that on his shoulder. He never impinged that on any players. But what he did do is when he looked a player in the eye, the player knew he was not BSing him, right? And that was very, very important in that particular era.
You know, I think I've told you the story before, Patrick, but when Meyer was still coaching, I went down to interview him one night during the week, and we were in his office, and Warren Doolin was the cameraman. He had the camera set up, ready to go, and you knocked on the door, and you said, "Mike, would you give us a minute?" And I said, "Sure." I stepped outside. Well, Warren Doolin forgot to shut his camera off. And the camera was aimed towards the floor, so we couldn't see any heads, but the conversation was recorded. And I believe you came in to talk to him about trading Bob Kreider to Seattle. Is that possible?
Yeah.
So I get on my shoulder, and these are the days where getting a scoop on Lobel or John Dennis was a big deal and a big feather in your hat. And I tell you, I wrestled with that, you know, all night long. And the Catholic guilt finally got to me about 11:15. And did not use it, but I had the whole scenario about Kreider, who was going to be, you know, traded to Seattle, et cetera, and I never went with it, and I'm glad I never went with it because it would have been rocking me ever since.
Well, I'm glad your Catholic guilt overcame your Harvard sensibilities.
You did the right thing, Michael. You did the right thing.
I don't remember. I don't think we traded Kreider to Seattle. I don't remember.
I can't remember. I want to say that was part of the conversation, but he was a holder at one time, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, not Bob Kreider. He wasn't.
From Alabama, right? It was a guard from Alabama.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, that was him. What else we got? Matt Millen.
Well, I gotta tell you guys one story, and I think pretty indicative of the guy. I think that when you talk about guards from Alabama, I think that John Hannah was among the top 5 players at any position in the history of the game, right?
Yes.
And John was just so demanding of himself, and again, he really took to Raymond Berry because John was very precise in everything that he did. And Bill Parcells once said to me that Hannah was the only offensive lineman that they had to account for 2 defensive guys to deal with him, because he'd always knock 2 guys on their butts, right? Not just one. And but John, one time, our assistant equipment guy, Donnie Brosher, Lord rest him, who passed away, calls me and says, "You got to come down here. Hannah's having a fit." And I went down, and John was really enraged, right? And I said, "What is wrong with you?" And he said, "I can't believe the Pro Bowl results came out." And I said, "Well, you're in it for like the 18th straight time. What's the problem?" And he goes, "Brian Holloway's in the Pro Bowl." And I said, "What is the problem with that?" He said, "He doesn't work hard enough to be in the Pro Bowl."
Wow.
And I looked at him and I said, "You know something, John?" I said, "If I were in Brian Holloway's position, if I were the tackle next to you, I'd be in the Pro Bowl. Anybody that's next to you is going to be in the Pro Bowl. So why don't you just relax and enjoy that?" But he was really, really aggravated about poor Brian Holloway.
What a great story that is.
Yeah. Yep.
To Johnny McKenzie's daughter, right? He was at the time. Brian Holloway.
Yeah.
Irving Fryer. How do you deal with a guy like him?
Irving, nobody ever came to me and said Irving Fryer is a jackass, right? No, nobody ever said that. Now, sometimes he did things that were immature, right?
Yeah.
He was a very bright guy, really bright guy. He was a Renaissance man in many respects. He played like 10 instruments. He played the drums, he played the piano, he played the trumpet. He was very good at it, right? And but he's a really bright guy that sometimes lacked common sense, right? And so he found himself in a bunch of pickles, and then he ends up in the ultimate pickle of this over influence from his mother that got him in trouble and put him in jail, but he was a real pleasant guy to work with, and he was an absolute phenomenal athlete. I mean, just off the charts athlete, right? The only guy that I ever came close to comparing him with in terms of athletic skills. Well, Hannah was obviously a great athlete, but it was Doug Flutie. I mean, Doug Flutie was a phenomenal athlete, right? And but Irving was just so fluid and smooth and I wish he didn't have this lack of common sense that just got him in these episodes. Otherwise, he'd have been in the Hall. He would absolutely have been in the Hall of Fame. No question about it.
I got to do our last spot here, and I'm really happy to do it, Patrick. And we have a big question to ask you after I do this that we do every week. It's directed toward campers, and it's about Cold Springs RV. Now's the time to see a fantastic selection of motorhomes at Cold Springs RV. They're not production trucks. They're not satellite trucks. They're motorhomes. So go out to the deals and see and enjoy the pleasure and pressure-free environment that Cold Springs RV offers. They have a large display of pop-ups for summer camping fun, 4th of July just around the corner. Is it ever? Happy 5th. So get ready with a great deal today. Learn more online. Go online, ColdSpringsRV.com. Make it a summer to remember with a camper from Cold Springs RV. That's Cold Springs RV in Ware, W-E-A-R-E, New Hampshire, which is just west of Manchester and north of Haverhill. And Mike has a question for Pat.
But can you believe that Lobel and I were never asked to read spots for Channel 5 and Channel 4? By the time both of us stumbled through them, the news would be over. So here's what we do. Cold Springs RV, you know that John Madden had the Madden cruiser.
Sure.
So they're going to build a Lobel cruiser for us. It's still in production, but it's really going to be something. And all our guests get a chance to take the Lobel cruiser cross country by themselves. So Pat, when it's finally built, you'll get to drive cross country by yourself. But you have to take one figure, and it can't be a family member, one sports figure, alive or deceased, to ride cross country with you, somebody you want to talk to, or somebody you always were curious about, or somebody you think you'd have fun with. So who would that be?
That'd probably be Tom Brady.
Really?
That'd probably be Tom Brady. Yeah, that would be. I never met Tom Brady, but I did meet his dad and play golf with him several times. Tom Brady Sr. and I won our flight and a member guest at the Boston Golf Club. So that was a big thrill. Yep. And if Tom Brady Jr. is anything like the old man, that'd be a trip worth taking.
You know, he introduced himself, the senior. First year Brady's playing, they're up in the WBZ box in Foxborough. And he comes over and says, "Hi, I'm Tom Brady's father." He just introduced himself to me like it was, I just want to say I'm Tom's father, and I just want to say hi. And it was pretty cool. You know, it's pretty unusual. You can always tell he was very grounded and had that common sense approach.
He was also very successful in his own right. He has a estate planning insurance business that does very, very well. So, I kidded with him. I said, "So what's it like at Christmas with you guys? You get you making a lot of money, Tom Jr., Giselle, and then Euclid is in the group now, right? Right? What's Christmas like for you people?"
Speaking about Tom Brady, you brought up a great segue here. Do you think about and analyze today's situation with Robert and Belichick and Brady and Mac Jones and Jonathan Kraft, who now is the Pat Sullivan of the Kraft family? I mean, Jonathan's there to take over. You could have been the owner of this team. Have you ever thought about you could have been having been the possible owner of this team?
Not after we sold it. You know, that was a pretty defining moment, and you know, we started down our own path. And
I know that, but did you ever think about it?
No, not really.
Okay, that's fair. Don't
forget, I was the youngest of six, so
okay. No, you were spare +5.
the caboose that my dad's accountant called me, the caboose. So.
Good for you. All right, so go back to the question of, do you think about today and the way that operations being run and get involved in the controversies and have opinions on these things? And would you dare offer us any opinions?
I'll tell you, it's very hard for me to sit back and look at what's gone on in Foxborough and comment in a negative fashion in any way. The stadium's amazing. They built it by themselves. There's no personal seat license. They're upgrading it right now. They're spending millions upgrading that place right now. It's going to be amazing for the fans next year. They've got 6 Super Bowl titles, right? Is it 6? They've got, you know, unprecedented record in playing in conference championship games. Everything that they've done right. And you know, there was obviously some moment in time when Tom Jr. decided that he no longer wanted to be a Patriot, and that was that. So they moved on.
You know, if people don't realize it, the Patriots are here because of the Sullivan family. Billy putting the group together to buy into the AFL in 1960. There was a time in 1970, I think the NFL had a rule you had to have a 50,000 seat stadium, and you built that place in less than a year, right?
327 days, and it was $200,000 over budget. It was $6.2 million.
Absolutely incredible.
Jonathan said we spent more on the plumbing in our place than you did on the whole thing. You know?
Well, after you opened, you had to spend some money in the plumbing yourself.
That's correct. That's correct. We had the famous when you talk about some of the nooks and crannies of our life.
Right.
One of them was super flush, right?
So, I was at the first game, August 15th, 1971. Rocky Thompson ran back a kickoff for a touchdown for the Giants. And we were sitting, I was with Herbie Gold, Johnny Gold. They had the tickets. They invited me and my dad. And the rest of the row was empty. They showed up about third quarter. And that was one of the biggest. And all the great things that everybody's done down there, the one thing they've not alleviated, the traffic is still pretty much the same as it was August 15th, 1971. But the point I'm trying to make is anybody that's listening, there are no New England Patriots. There's someplace else. There's somebody else that don't exist because of the Sullivan family. And as a guy who grew up here, and Bob and I worked here a long time, we want to thank you and thank your entire family.
Thank you. Well, I appreciate that. But I will say that when and this was another strategic move on the part of my father and my brother. When my brother bought the stadium, my dad and he executed basically an unbreakable lease. And when Victor Kiam bought the team, he wanted to move the team to Jacksonville. And he was ready to go. But the state, and if you'll recall, he bought the team but didn't buy the stadium.
Right.
And Robert Kraft and Steve Karp ended up buying the stadium because Robert Kraft was brilliant enough to understand that the stadium actually controlled the team, right? Wow. Because the lease was so onerous for them to break it that you couldn't move the team without the stadium. And not owning the stadium was, I said to Victor, I said, you're going to really regret not owning the stadium. He could have paid $22 million for the stadium, something like that, and he chose not to. And that was really, when you talk about my father's commitment to the area and keeping the team here, one of the key things that he did that nobody ever knew about was executing that lease with his son to make sure that effectively the team could never move. Right.
Wow. Fabulous.
Fascinating. Patrick, I know you have to run. I really appreciate it. I know Michael does too, how much.
Absolutely.
You coming on today. This has been fabulous and fascinating. As long as Aiden was the star, I don't care what you say.
Aiden and the Lobsters.
Aiden and the Lobster guy. But hey, it's great catching up with you guys. You look great, and I look forward to seeing it at some point in the future.
I hope so. Good luck, continued success, and your best to Lynn.
Okay, take care. See you.
Thanks. Patrick Sullivan.
All right, bye-bye.
Thank you very much.